The space station called Apex Ring was the largest structure Yuna had ever seen. It floated in the darkness between stars like a giant wheel made of metal and light. Thousands of ships came and went every hour. Millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds lived and worked inside its massive walls. Yuna stood near a viewing window and watched a ship dock at one of the many ports. Her eyes were wide with wonder. She had seen pictures and videos, but nothing could prepare her for the real thing. "We should keep moving," said Taiho. He stood behind her, dressed in simple clothes that made him look like an ordinary assistant. But his eyes never stopped watching the crowd around them. "The market district is still far." Yuna smiled at him. "Let me enjoy this moment. How often does a person get to see something like this?" Taiho did not smile back. His job was not to enjoy things. His job was to keep her safe. And keeping her safe in a place like this, surrounded by aliens who saw humans as nothing more than weak newcomers, was not easy. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 5 years ago, in a galaxy filled with ancient species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Most aliens looked down on them. Some ignored them completely. A few openly hated them, but Yuna had insisted on coming here. She wanted to see the galaxy with her own eyes, not through reports and screens. She wanted to understand these alien cultures, to walk among them as an equal. What nobody on this station knew was that Yuna was not an ordinary human delegate. She was Princess Yuna of the United Earth Sovereignty, third in line to lead all of humanity. But she had left that title behind on Earth. Here, she was just Yuna, a curious young woman exploring the stars. They walked through long corridors filled with beings of every shape and size. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some floated in the air or crawled on multiple legs. The air smelled strange, a mix of foods and perfumes from 100 different worlds. The market district was even more crowded. Vendors shouted in languages that Yuna's translator device turned into words she could understand. They sold everything from exotic fruits to ancient weapons to pets that glowed in the dark. Yuna stopped at a small stall, run by a 4-armed creature no taller than her waist. His skin was gray, and his eyes were large and gentle. He sold small sculptures made from colored crystal. "These are beautiful," Yuna said, picking one up. It showed a flower she had never seen before. The little vendor looked surprised that a human was speaking to him. Most of the powerful species ignored small traders like him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I make them myself." Yuna bought 3 sculptures. She paid more than the asking price, which made the vendor's large eyes grow even larger. As she turned to show Taiho her purchase, she heard shouting behind her. "Move! Move aside! Make way!" The crowd began to push and scatter. Yuna looked up and saw a massive hover platform floating through the market. It was covered in gold and jewels, and on it stood several tall aliens with blue-gray skin and sharp features. They wore expensive robes and looked at everyone around them with disgust. These were the Qitari. Yuna had read about them. They were one of the most powerful species in the coalition. They controlled vast territories and enormous fleets. And they believed they were better than everyone else. At the center of the platform stood the tallest Qitari of all. His robes were the finest, and a golden chain hung around his neck showing his noble rank. This was Lord Voss, a high-ranking aristocrat from one of the oldest Qitari families. The platform pushed through the crowd without slowing down. Beings jumped out of the way to avoid being hit. Nobody complained. Nobody dared to challenge a Qitari noble. Yuna tried to step aside, but the crowd pressed against her. She had nowhere to go. The edge of the platform struck her hard in the shoulder. The impact threw her sideways, and she crashed against a metal railing. Pain exploded through her arm as it bent the wrong way. Her head hit the railing, and she felt something warm and wet running down her face. She lay on the ground, gasping. Her arm was broken. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead, falling onto the station floor in bright red drops. Lord Voss looked down at her from his platform. He did not look concerned. He did not look sorry. He looked annoyed, like someone who had stepped in something unpleasant. "Humans," he said to his companions, and they all laughed. "They scatter like insects, yet somehow still get in the way." The platform continued on without stopping. Lord Voss did not look back. Taiho was at Yuna's side in an instant. His face was calm, but his hands trembled with barely controlled anger. He wanted to chase after that platform. He wanted to make Lord Voss pay for what he had done. But Yuna grabbed his wrist with her good hand. "No," she whispered through the pain. "Do not make a scene. That is not why we are here." "He hurt you," Taiho said, his voice tight, "and he is not worth starting a war over." Taiho took a deep breath and nodded. He carefully helped her sit up. Around them, aliens watched with curiosity. Many had never seen human blood before. It was so red, so bright. Some seemed disturbed by it. Others just stared. Station security arrived a few minutes later. They were efficient but not particularly concerned. They took statements and recorded the incident. When Taiho demanded they do something about Lord Voss, the security officer, a tall being with gray skin and no eyes, made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Lord Voss is a Qatari noble," the officer said. "You are humans. There is nothing to be done. Be grateful it was not worse." Yuna was taken to the medical bay. The doctors there were good. They fixed her arm and closed the wound on her head. But they treated her the same way everyone else did, like she was something small and unimportant dot as she lay on the medical bed. A station clerk came to process her treatment authorization. The clerk ran a biometric scan, a standard procedure to confirm identity and payment. The clerk looked at her screen. Then she looked again. Her face went pale. "Is something wrong?" Yuna asked. The clerk did not answer. She excused herself quickly and rushed out of the room. Through the door, Yuna could hear her making urgent calls to her superiors. Taiho moved closer to the bed. "It seems your secret is about to become public." Yuna closed her eyes and sighed. She had wanted to remain anonymous. She had wanted to be treated like everyone else. But perhaps that was the problem. She had been treated like everyone else. And now she understood exactly how badly that could mean. The door opened, and several important-looking officials rushed in. Their faces showed shock, fear, and confusion. The simple accident in the market was about to become something much bigger. The news spread through Apex Ring like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, every official on the station knew the truth. Within 2 hours, the information had reached the highest levels of the Galactic Coalition government. The injured human was not a simple delegate. She was not a traitor or a tourist. She was Princess Yuna of the United Earth Sovereignty, daughter of King Do-yun, third in line to lead all of humanity across the stars. High Counselor Ren received the report in his private office. He was an old being with skin like cracked leather and eyes that had seen countless crises come and go. But this news made him set down his drink and read the report twice. "Are we certain?" he asked his assistant. "Yes, High Counselor. The biometric data is confirmed. She is exactly who the system says she is." Ren leaned back in his chair. This was a problem. The Qatari were one of the most powerful members of the coalition. Lord Voss came from one of their oldest and most influential families. And he had just injured the princess of a species that the galaxy barely took seriously. Under normal circumstances, this would be nothing. A minor incident. A small payment to make it go away. But injuring foreign royalty was not a minor incident. Under coalition law, It could be considered an act of war. Ren summoned the human ambassador immediately. Ambassador Hana arrived within the hour. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She walked into Ren's office without showing any fear or concern. Behind her came 2 human guards, though they stayed outside the door. "Ambassador Hana," Ren said, gesturing for her to sit. "I assume you know why I called you here." "I do. Your princess was traveling on my station without any announcement, without proper security, without any indication of her true identity." Ren's voice carried a hint of accusation. "Why would your people do such a thing?" Hannah smiled slightly. "Because Princess Yuna asked to travel this way. She wanted to experience the coalition as an ordinary person, to learn about alien cultures without the burden of ceremony and protocol. That is the human way, High Counselor. Our leaders believe they should understand their people, not hide from them." Ren stared at her. In all his years of dealing with different species, he had never heard of royalty choosing to travel in secret. Most species displayed their important people with great pride and protection. The idea of a princess walking through a crowded market like a common citizen was strange to him. "That decision has created a serious problem," Ren said. "The decision did not create the problem," Hana replied, her voice still calm. "Lord Voss created the problem when he injured a person and laughed about it. Whether that person was a princess or a street cleaner, his action was wrong." Ren had no answer for that. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Lord Voss received his own visitors. His uncle, Commander Talik of the Qatari military, arrived with a face full of thunder. "Do you understand what you have done?" Talik demanded, storming into Voss's luxury quarters. Voss was relaxing on a large couch, drinking expensive wine. He barely looked at his uncle. "I bumped into a human. So what? They are weak creatures. They should learn to stay out of the way. That human was a princess. You fool." Voss finally looked up. For a moment, something like concern crossed his face. But then he laughed. "A princess? Those primitives have royalty? How amusing." "This is not amusing." Talik grabbed the wine glass from his nephew's hand and threw it against the wall. "Under coalition law, injuring foreign royalty can be considered an act of war. Do you want to start a war with the humans?" "A war?" Voss laughed again. "What war? The humans have been in space for barely a century. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. They are nothing compared to the Qatari Empire. Numbers are not everything," Talik said darkly. "I have studied the humans. They are not as weak as you think. And more importantly, the coalition will not support us if we are clearly in the wrong. We need to make this go away." Talik proposed a solution. They would offer the humans a financial settlement. Some credits, perhaps a trade agreement. The humans would accept because they always accepted. Lesser species always took what they were given and stayed quiet. That was how the galaxy worked. The offer was sent to Ambassador Hana within hours. It was generous by Qatari standards, enough money to build a small colony. Hana rejected it immediately. "We do not want your money," she told the Qatari representative. "We want acknowledgement of wrongdoing. We want an apology." The representative looked at her like she had grown a second head. "An apology? From a Qatari noble? To a human?" "Yes, that will never happen." Hannah nodded slowly. "Then we have nothing more to discuss." News of the rejected offer spread quickly. Many aliens were shocked. Lesser species did not reject offers from the Qatari. It simply was not done. Some thought the humans were brave. Others thought they were stupid. In the medical bay, Yuna watched the situation develop on a screen. Her arm was healed, but she stayed in bed, thinking about what to do next. "You could accept the money," Taiho said. He stood by the window, watching ships come and go. "It would end this quietly. And then what? Yuna asked. We go home with credits in our pockets, and Lord Voss continues treating people like insects? How many others has he hurt, Tayo? How many small vendors and traders have been pushed aside or knocked down by his platform? Those people cannot reject settlement offers. Those people have no voice. Tayo turned to look at her. You want to be their voice? I want to show them that they can have a voice of their own. Yuna contacted Earth that night. She spoke directly to her father, King Do-yun, through a secure channel. She told him everything that had happened, everything she had seen and felt. The king was quiet for a long time after she finished. Then he said, You were right to reject the offer. You were right to stand firm. Let me handle what comes next. The next day, a message arrived at Apex Ring. It was addressed to High Counselor Ren and every member of the coalition government. The sender was King Do-yun of the United Earth. Sovereignty. He wished to address the coalition directly. This had never happened before. No human leader had ever spoken to the full coalition. Most aliens did not even know what the human king looked like. They expected him to beg for forgiveness, to accept whatever scraps the Qatari offered, to know his place as the leader of a lesser species. The transmission was scheduled for the next morning. Every screen on Apex Ring would carry it. Every representative would watch. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She stood at the window of her room, looking out at the stars. Are you afraid? Tayo asked. No, Yuna said. I am curious. The galaxy thinks they know what humans are. Tomorrow, my father will show them how wrong they are. Tayo nodded. He had served the royal family for many years. He knew King Do-yun well. The galaxy was expecting a weak plea from a primitive species. They were about to be very surprised. Every screen on Apex Ring lit up at exactly the same moment. In meeting halls and private quarters, in restaurants and shops, in the corridors and docking bays, millions of beings stopped what they were doing and watched. King Do-yun appeared on the screen. He was not what they expected. Many aliens imagined human leaders as loud and aggressive, waving their arms and making threats. Others expected him to be weak and nervous, a small creature begging for mercy from his betters. King Do-yun was neither. He sat in a simple chair, wearing plain clothes without decoration or jewels. His face was calm. His voice was quiet. He spoke like a man who had nothing to prove. People of the Galactic Coalition, he began. My name is Do-yun. I am the elected leader of the United Earth Sovereignty. I speak to you today, not as a king demanding satisfaction, but as a father who loves his daughter, and as a human who believes in something greater than power. He paused, letting his words settle. 3 days ago, my daughter Yuna was injured on your station. A Qatari noble struck her with his platform and laughed as she bled on your floor. When she asked for justice, she was told that there could be no justice because she was human, and humans do not matter. Another pause. Across the station, aliens shifted uncomfortably. I am not here to threaten war. I am not here to demand blood. Violence would only prove that we are exactly what many of you believe us to be. Primitive creatures who solve problems with our fists. Instead, I am here to ask a question. King Do-yun leaned forward slightly. Among your many species, is there not one law that values life equally? Is there not one principle that says all beings deserve respect? Or shall we learn that the Galactic Coalition measures worth by strength alone? He let the question hang in the air. If strength is all that matters, then we have nothing more to discuss. We will return to our small corner of space and build our strength until we are big enough to be heard. But if your coalition is truly a place of justice and fairness, then I ask you to prove it. Not for my daughter, not for humanity, but for every small species that watches today, wondering if they too will ever matter. The screen went dark. For a long moment, Apex Ring was silent. Then the talking began, quiet at first, then louder and louder until it filled every corridor. High Counselor Wren sat in his chair, staring at the blank screen. He had expected threats. He had expected demands. He had prepared responses for anger and violence. He had no response for this. The human king had not attacked the coalition. He had held up a mirror and forced them to look at themselves. Within hours, the footage of Yuna's injury began spreading across the station. Someone had recorded it and shared it widely. Aliens watched a small human woman knocked to the ground by a massive hover platform. They watched her bleed, bright red blood pooling on the metal floor. They watched Lord Voss laugh and walk away. Something shifted in the public mood. The powerful Qatari had always been feared and respected. But watching that footage, many aliens felt something new. They felt disgust. Lord Voss tried to fight back. He released a statement claiming that Yuna had been in a restricted area, that she had stepped in front of his platform on purpose, that the whole thing was a trick to make the Qatari look bad. Station security released their official footage. It showed Yuna standing in a public market, doing nothing wrong. It showed Lord Voss's platform, pushing through the crowd without care. It showed every moment of the impact. Every one of Lord Voss's lies was proven false. Commander Talat was furious with his nephew. "You have made us look like fools and monsters," he hissed in a private meeting. "The whole galaxy is watching, and you gave them exactly what they wanted to see." "Then make it stop," Voss demanded. "You are a military commander. Use your power." "My power means nothing if the coalition turns against us. We are strong, but we are not strong enough to fight everyone." As the Qatari argued among themselves, something else happened. A human ship arrived at Apex Ring. It was the Starship Horizon, commanded by Captain Juno. Officially, it was there to provide diplomatic support for the human delegation. The Horizon was not a large ship by galactic standards, but it was sleek and well-armed, and arrived with 4 escort vessels. They took up position near the station, not threatening, just present. High Counselor Wren noticed. Everyone noticed. Captain Juno visited Ambassador Hana shortly after arriving. He was a tall man with a serious face and eyes that missed nothing. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad," Hana admitted, "but getting better. Public opinion is shifting." The king's speech worked, and the Qatari? Angry, scared, dangerous. Junho nodded. "Then we stay ready." Princess Yuna decided it was time to speak for herself. She requested permission to address the coalition representatives directly. High Counselor Wren, eager to appear fair, granted her request. She stood before them in a simple room, her arms still showing faint marks from the healing process. A small scar visible on her forehead. She did not hide these signs of injury. She let everyone see them. "I came to Apex Ring because I wanted to understand your worlds," she said. "I wanted to learn. I wanted to connect. I did not come as a princess demanding attention. I came as a curious person seeking knowledge." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of dozens of different species. "Lord Voss hurt me. That is true. But I am not standing here today because I am special. I am standing here because I can stand here. I have a title, a family, a government that will speak for me. I have power, even if I tried to hide it." Her voice grew stronger. "But what about those who have no power? What about the small vendor I was buying from when Lord Voss pushed through the crowd? What about all the beings who are knocked aside every day, who bleed on these floors and have no one to speak for them? I was not hurt because I am a princess. I was hurt because Lord Voss believed humans do not matter. How many others has he hurt who could not speak as I do now?" The room was completely silent. Then something unexpected happened. A representative from a small species called the Viri stood up. He was short, barely reaching Yuna's shoulder, with green skin and nervous eyes. 3 cycles ago, he said, his voice shaking, my brother was killed by a Qatari transport ship. They did not even stop. We filed a complaint. Nothing happened. No one cared. Another representative stood, this one from a species Yuna did not recognize. The Qatari took our mining rights through threats and intimidation. When we complained, we were told to be grateful they did not take more. One by one, representatives from 6 different species rose to share their stories. Years of abuse, ignored complaints, and casual cruelty, all coming to light because one human princess had refused to stay silent. High Counselor Ren watched with growing concern. This was no longer about one accident. This was becoming something much larger, a reckoning that the coalition had avoided for far too long. The Qatari representatives left the room without speaking. Their faces showed fear beneath their anger. For the first time in centuries, the lesser species of the galaxy were finding their voice. And it had all started with a simple collision in a crowded market. The Galactic Coalition had not held an emergency tribunal in over 200 years. The last one had ended a war between 3 powerful species. This one would be different. This time, the accused was a single noble from the mightiest civilization in known space. And his accusers were species that most considered too weak to matter. High Counselor Ren opened the tribunal in the Great Hall, a massive chamber at the heart of Apex Ring. Representatives from over 100 species filled the seats. News drones floated overhead, broadcasting everything to billions of beings across the galaxy. Lord Voss stood at the center of the hall, still wearing his fine robes, still carrying himself with pride. But those who looked closely could see something new in his eyes. Fear. Commander Talek sat in the Qatari section, his face showing no emotion. He had tried everything to stop this tribunal. He had offered bribes, made threats, called in favors from allies. Nothing had worked. The smaller species, united for the first time in memory, had demanded justice. The coalition could not refuse without proving that King Do-Yun was right. That strength was all that mattered. Princess Yuna sat with the human delegation. Ambassador Hana was beside her, calm as always. Taiho stood behind them, watching everything. The charges were read aloud. Lord Voss was accused of reckless harm against a foreign dignitary, failure to provide assistance to an injured person, and conduct unworthy of a coalition member. Voss's defense was simple. He claimed the incident was an accident, that he had not seen the human, that his platform's operators were to blame. He showed no remorse. He made no apology. When asked if he regretted his actions, he said only, "I regret that this minor matter has been blown out of proportion." The smaller species presented their evidence. The footage, the medical reports, the testimony of witnesses. But more than that, they presented something else. A history of abuse that had been hidden for too long. Representative after representative came forward. They told stories of Qatari nobles taking what they wanted, hurting who they pleased, facing no consequences. Each story was small on its own. Together, they painted a picture of a civilization that believed it was above the law. During a break in the proceedings, Commander Talek approached Ambassador Hana in a quiet corridor. "This must stop," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Name your price, territory, technology, trade agreements. Whatever you want, it is yours." Hana looked at him with steady eyes. "We do not want your bribes. Then what do you want?" "Justice. An apology. A promise that this will not happen again." Talek's face twisted with frustration. "You are asking a Qatari noble to bow to humans. It will never happen. His pride will not allow it. Then his pride will be his downfall." Talek leaned closer. "You do not understand what you are doing. The Qatari have powerful allies. We can make things very difficult for your species. Behind Hannah, Captain Junho stepped out of the shadows. He had been listening the whole time. "We know," he said calmly. "Earth has already placed its defense forces on alert. Not as a threat, just a precaution." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We have learned, Commander, that the galaxy respects strength. We hope it will not come to that. But if it does, you will find that humans are not as weak as you believe." Talek stared at the human captain for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Back in the Great Hall, the tribunal continued. Lord Voss grew more desperate as the evidence mounted against him. He could see the mood of the chamber shifting. Even species that usually supported the Qatari were staying silent. In desperation, Voss did something unexpected. He invoked an ancient Qatari tradition, the right of honor combat. "I demand satisfaction," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "Let the matter be decided by strength. I challenge the human who accuses me to face me in combat. If I win, all charges are dropped. If I lose, I will accept whatever punishment the tribunal decides." The hall erupted in murmurs. Honor combat was rare, but it was legal under coalition law. If Yuna refused, it might look like weakness. Taiho stepped forward before anyone could speak. "I accept the challenge on behalf of Princess Yuna." Voss laughed. The Qatari were twice the size of humans and far stronger. Their bones were denser, their muscles more powerful. In their history, no smaller species had ever defeated a Qatari warrior in single combat. "This small human wishes to fight me?" Voss said with amusement. "Very well. I will try not to kill him too quickly." Yuna grabbed Taiho's arm. "You do not have to do this." Taiho looked at her with calm eyes. "Yes, I do. He taught me that sometimes the smallest gesture carries the greatest weight. Let me carry this weight for you." The combat took place in the station's central arena, a circular space surrounded by viewing platforms. Thousands of beings came to watch. Millions more watched through screens across the galaxy. Lord Voss entered the arena in traditional Qatari fighting armor. He carried a long blade designed for his species, heavy enough to crush bone with a single blow. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Taiho entered wearing simple clothes. He carried no weapon. In his tradition, a bodyguard's hands were weapon enough. The fight began. Voss attacked immediately, swinging his blade in powerful arcs meant to end the combat quickly. Taiho dodged. He ducked. He rolled. He was faster than Voss expected, always one step ahead of the deadly blade. But speed alone could not win. Voss landed glancing blows. Each one sent Taiho staggering. Blood appeared on his face, his arms, his chest. The crowd gasped at the sight of red human blood against the arena floor. Voss laughed. "You see? Humans are fragile. They break easily." But Taiho did not break. He kept moving, kept dodging, kept getting back up every time he was knocked down. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The crowd grew quiet. They were witnessing something they did not understand. Voss was tiring. His swings grew slower, his breathing heavier. The Qatari were strong, but they were not built for endurance. They won their fights quickly or not at all. Taiho was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His body screamed with pain. But he had trained his whole life for moments like this. He had learned to push past pain, past exhaustion, past every limit his body tried to set. "You should have ended this quickly," Taiho said, his voice steady despite his injuries. "Now it is too late." He attacked. His strikes were precise, targeting the weak points in Qatari anatomy that he had memorized years ago. Joints, nerve clusters, pressure points. Each hit was small, but together they added up. Voss stumbled. His blade fell from numb fingers. He tried to swing with his fists, but his arms would not obey him. With a final effort, Taiho swept Voss's legs out from under him. The massive Qatari crashed to the ground. Gasping for breath, unable to rise, Taiho stood over him, battered and bleeding but still standing. The arena was completely silent. Slowly, painfully, Taiho extended his hand to his fallen opponent. "Yield," he said. "There is no shame in it." Lord Voss stared at the offered hand. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to keep fighting, to die before surrendering to a human. But he had no strength left. His body had betrayed him. "I yield," he whispered. The silence stretched for one heartbeat, 2, 3. Then the arena exploded with sound. Cheering, shouting, stamping of feet and claws and tentacles. The noise came not from the Qatari, who sat in stunned silence, but from every other species in the arena. The small ones, the weak ones, the ones who had spent centuries being told they did not matter. They cheered for the human who had done what they all dreamed of doing. He had stood up to the mighty and won. Yuna ran to Taiho as medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. She caught him as his legs finally gave out. "You fool," she said, tears in her eyes. "You brave, stubborn fool." Taiho managed a small smile. "Did I carry the weight well?" She held him close. "You carried it perfectly." The tribunal delivered its verdict 3 days after the duel. Lord Voss was stripped of all his titles and lands. He was banished from Coalition space for the rest of his natural life. He was forbidden from holding any position of power or influence. Everything he had built, everything his family had given him, was gone in an instant. He stood in the great hall as the sentence was read, his face empty of expression. He had lost more than his honor in that arena. He had lost his belief that strength alone made him superior. Taiho had broken something inside him that no medical technology could heal. The Qatari noble houses were divided. The older members were furious. They saw this as an insult to their entire civilization, a wound that demanded revenge. But the younger members, the ones who had watched the duel and seen the cheering crowds, were quieter. Some of them had begun to wonder if their elders were wrong about many things. Commander Talik watched his nephew being led away by security officers. He had failed to protect his family's honor. He had failed to stop this disaster. But as he watched, a strange thought crossed his mind. Perhaps this disaster was also an opportunity. Perhaps the Qatari needed to change before the galaxy changed around them. High Counselor Ren requested a private meeting with Princess Yuna before she left the station. They met in his office, just the two of them, with guards waiting outside. "I owe you an apology," Ren said. He looked older than he had a week ago, as if the tribunal had taken years from his life. "Not just for what happened to you, but for what the coalition allowed to happen for so long. We built laws that protected the powerful and ignored everyone else. We told ourselves it was necessary, that order required hierarchy. We were wrong." Yuna studied him carefully. "Words are easy, High Counselor. What matters is what comes next." "I know." Ren picked up a document from his desk. "I am proposing reforms to the Coalition Charter. Equal protection for all member species. Mandatory investigation of abuse claims. Real consequences for those who violate the rights of others, regardless of their power or position." Will the powerful species agree to this? Some will resist. But after what happened here, they know they cannot resist forever. The smaller species are organizing. They are talking to each other. They are realizing that together, they are not so small after all. Ren managed a tired smile. Your father's question haunts them. They do not want to admit that strength is all that matters. They want to believe they are better than that. Yuna took the document and read it carefully. It was not perfect. There were loopholes, compromises, words that could be interpreted in different ways. But it was a start, "Thank you," she said. "This is more than I expected. Thank your father. Thank your bodyguard. Thank yourself." Ren stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "The galaxy will be watching what humanity does next. I hope you will continue to surprise us." Yuna shook his hand. "We will try." Commander Talek found Ambassador Hana in the station's garden district, a large area filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. She was sitting on a bench, watching alien flowers bloom. "May I join you?" "Yes." Hana gestured to the empty space beside her. Talek sat down heavily, like a man carrying a great burden. "Your people are strange," he said after a moment. "So I have been told. You do not conquer. You do not dominate. You had every opportunity to demand revenge, to humiliate us further, to take what you wanted by force. Instead, you asked for justice and fairness." He shook his head slowly. How do you remain so controlled?" Hannah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "We remember what it was like to be small, to be weak, to be overlooked and abused by those with more power." She looked at him directly. "Our history is filled with pain, Commander. We did terrible things to each other before we learned better. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. But we survived. And we swore we would never forget what it felt like to be powerless. So you fight for the powerless. We try. We do not always succeed. We are not perfect. But we try." Talek was silent for a long moment. "I have spent my life believing that the strong must rule the weak. That is how the galaxy works. That is how it has always worked. Perhaps," Anna said gently, "it is time to imagine how it could work differently." The human starship Horizon prepared to depart. Captain Junho supervised the final preparations while Yuna said her goodbyes. She went first to the medical bay where Taiho was recovering. His wounds were healing well, but the doctors wanted to keep him for observation. Kitari and human bodies were very different, and they wanted to make sure there were no complications. "You should be going with them," Yuna said, sitting beside his bed. Taiho shook his head. "I will follow when I am ready. You do not need me to protect you anymore. You have proven you can protect yourself." Yuna laughed softly. "I did nothing. You are the one who fought. You did everything. You stood up. You refused to accept injustice. You gave others the courage to do the same." He reached out and touched her hand. "That is what true strength looks like." She squeezed his hand and said nothing. Some things did not need words. Her last stop was the market district. The small vendor with 4 arms, whose name was Ori, was still there, selling his crystal sculptures. When he saw Yuna approaching, his large eyes grew even larger. "Princess," he stammered, starting to bow. "Please do not," Yuna said quickly. "I am just Yuna. I was just Yuna when I bought your sculptures, and I am just Yuna now." Ori straightened slowly. Around them, other vendors and shoppers had stopped to watch. Word had spread about what happened in this market, about the princess who bled on this very floor. "Because of you," Ori said quietly, "my people have been given a seat on the Minor Species Council. For the first time in our history, someone is listening to us. Someone cares what we think." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She had not expected this. She had not planned any of this. "I did not do anything special," she said. "I just refuse to accept that any life is worth less than another. That is exactly what made it special." Ori reached under his stall and pulled out a small box. Inside was the most beautiful crystal sculpture Yuna had ever seen. It showed a human figure standing tall, light radiating from its heart. "I made this for you," Ori said, "so you will remember that even the smallest light can push back the darkness." Yuna accepted the gift with trembling hands. She did not trust herself to speak. She walked to the docking bay where the Horizon waited. Ambassador Hana was already aboard. Captain Junho met her at the airlock. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Yuna looked back at the station. Somewhere in there, beings from 100 different worlds were talking about what had happened. Somewhere, small voices were finding the courage to speak up. Somewhere, the powerful were beginning to understand that their power had limits. "Yes," she said. "I am ready." The horizon pulled away from Apex Ring and turned toward the stars. Yuna stood on the observation deck, watching the massive station shrink into the distance. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. Junho stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. "The change?" He considered the question carefully. "Maybe not all of it. Change is slow. Old habits are strong. There will be setbacks, disappointments, times when it seems like nothing has improved. That is not very encouraging." Junho smiled slightly. "But we made them see us. We showed them who we are and what we believe. And once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. They will think about us now. They will wonder about us. And some of them, maybe just a few at first, will start to believe that things can be different." Yuna watched the stars streaming past. She thought about her father, waiting for her on Earth. She thought about Taiho, healing in a station full of aliens who now looked at humans differently. She thought about Ori and his crystal sculptures, about the Vire representative who had spoken about his brother, about all the small voices that had finally been heard. She had come to Apex Ring as an anonymous traveler, seeking knowledge and understanding. She was leaving as something more. Not a conqueror, not a hero, just a person who had refused to be silent when silence was easier. And somewhere in the vast coalition, other voices were beginning to rise. Small voices, quiet voices, voices that had been ignored for too long, because one human princess had shown them that they could. The stars stretched out before the horizon, endless and full of possibility. Humanity was still young in this galaxy, still learning, still growing. But they had made their mark. They had proven that strength was not measured in ships or weapons, but in the courage to stand up for what was right. Yuna smiled as Earth's sun appeared in the distance. A tiny point of light that was home. The accident in Market had been simple, but its consequences would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all. The stubborn, unshakable belief that one person could make a difference. That justice was worth fighting for. That every life, no matter how small, had value. The stars welcomed them home.